My mom casually said, "Pack your things. Your brother's kids need this house more than you do." I closed the door and spoke through the intercom, "Show up again, and you'll be leaving in a police car." I live in a quiet, leafy suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. I have been working fully remote since early 2019, well before the world shut down, and my career has been incredibly demanding, but highly rewarding. 2 years ago, I finally saved up enough to buy my dream home, a beautiful, historic 1920s craftsman-style house. It's a modest but spacious 4-bedroom, 2,200 square foot property that I have been slowly and painstakingly renovating by hand. It's my absolute pride and joy. My older brother David, 36 male, lives about 30 minutes away with his wife Sarah, 34 female, and their 3 young kids, Leo, 9 male, Mia, 7 female, and Noah, 4 male. They currently live in a cramped, outdated 2-bedroom apartment next to a noisy highway. David is an assistant manager at a big box hardware store. I respect my brother, and I know retail management is grueling, exhausting work, but there is a significant income disparity between us. I make roughly 4 times his salary. The nightmare started 2 weeks ago at a routine Sunday family dinner at my parents' house. My mom, Helen, 61 female, and my dad, Robert, 63 male, were hosting. We were sitting around the dining room table eating pot roast when my mom started asking very pointed, oddly specific questions about my daily work schedule. "So Alex, you really just sit at that computer desk all day long? You don't actually leave the house to go anywhere?" she asked, passing the mashed potatoes. I sighed, having explained this for probably the 100th time. "Yes, Mom. I work from home, but I am actively working. I have back-to-back video meetings, I write complex code, I manage a team of 15 engineers across 3 different time zones, and I oversee massive server migrations. It's a very intense job." My dad scoffed, taking a sip of his beer. "Right, but it's not like real time's work where you have to physically show up somewhere, clock in, and sweat a little, right? It's just typing." I should have seen the massive red flags waving in my face, but I was completely blindsided when my mom set her fork down, folded her hands, and said, "Well, your father and I have been thinking. Since you don't really need all that space in that big house of yours, you really just need a desk and an internet connection. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for David, Sarah, and the kids to live in your house? You could move into our basement. We're getting the drywall finished next month, and we could put a nice rug down for you." I literally burst out laughing. I thought it was a bizarre deadpan joke. It wasn't. My dad suddenly stood up from the table, walked over to the living room, and came back with his iPad. He launched into a literal color-coded slide deck presentation that he had apparently spent days preparing. It was titled, "Family Resource Reallocation Strategy." I sat there utterly paralyzed with shock as my own father presented his bullet points. Point 1. Since I work from home, I do not require a traditional housing structure. Point 2. A family with 3 growing children has actual legitimate space needs that supersede a bachelor's comfort. Point 3. The basement would be the perfect cozy environment for a young single man who just needs Wi-Fi and a microwave. Point 4. This would be the ultimate act of helping the family and fulfilling my duty as a supportive younger brother. Point 5. They would generously allow me to use the main floor guest bathroom during standard business hours, provided I cleaned it weekly. I sat there absolutely stunned, my jaw practically on the floor, while David uncomfortably pushed his peas around his plate, refusing to make eye contact with me. Sarah, however, was practically glowing. She kept saying things like, "Oh, we couldn't possibly ask that of him," but she said it in that sickeningly sweet tone of voice where, she was already mentally picking out curtains for my living room and deciding where to put her farmhouse chic decor. "You're joking." I finally managed to choke out, staring at my parents. "You seriously want me to give up the beautiful historic home I bought with my own hard-earned money, uproot my entire life, and move into your unfinished damp basement just because my job is remote?" My mom's face hardened. "Well, Alex, it's not like you're using the house properly. David's children are sleeping on top of each other. They need real bedrooms. You have 2 completely empty rooms that you just use for your silly little office space and your hobbies. It's incredibly wasteful when your own blood family needs real housing." The hobbies she was referring to is my professional audio engineering studio. I mix and master podcasts and indie music tracks as a side business, which brings in an extra $2,500 a month on top of my tech salary. It's a legitimate secondary income stream, complete with expensive soundproofing and high-end equipment. I tried to explain reality to them. I told them that I bought my house with my own money. I pay the massive mortgage. I pay the property taxes, the home insurance, the high utility bills, and the maintenance costs. My dad actually slammed his hand on the table and yelled, "But you earned that money sitting on your ass at home in your pajamas." It's not the same as David, who has to commute an hour every day and stand on his feet dealing with customers at a real job. He deserves a home like that. I left the dinner immediately. I drove home shaking with anger, assuming that once they slept on it, they would realize how completely insane and legally impossible their proposal was. Instead, it got worse. The next morning, I started getting a barrage of text messages from my mom. She was sending me links to basement paint colors, asking if I preferred agreeable gray or accessible beige. She asked if I wanted cheap carpet or laminate flooring in my new basement zone. She even sent me a hand-drawn floor plan with little squares labeled Alex's desk area and Alex's sleeping cot. Yesterday afternoon, she texted me asking me to leave my spare house keys under the mat so she and Sarah could come over while I was playing on the computer to measure the children's new bedrooms. I responded with a firm, unequivocal no. I told her they would never get keys to my house and to drop this psychotic delusion immediately. She replied that I was being a selfish, greedy pig who was hoarding family resources. My dad called me late last night, leaving a furious voicemail, stating he was deeply ashamed of my lack of family values and that a man who works in his pajamas has no right to keep a real family trapped in a tiny apartment. For the record, I do not work in pajamas. I dress in business casual for my daily video calls. I manage critical infrastructure that processes millions of financial transactions daily. But apparently, because I do it from my home office instead of commuting to a miserable gray cubicle farm, I don't have a real job that deserves real housing. Am I losing my mind? How do I get through to these people? How do I make them understand that working remotely doesn't mean I'm playing a pretend job while squatting in a house I don't deserve? Edit. To answer a few common questions from the comments, no, I cannot just give them the house even if I wanted to. The mortgage is solely in my name, and David's credit is terrible. He couldn't take over the payments if he tried. Also, I have offered in the past to pay for David to take an IT certification boot camp so he could get a remote job at my company. He refused, saying he isn't a computer nerd and prefers honest work. Finally, yes. David has always been the golden child while I was the quiet nerd they ignored until they realized I had money. Update 1. 2 weeks later, I cannot believe I am sitting here writing this update, but things have escalated far beyond anything I could have ever imagined in my wildest nightmares. Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post, validating my reality and confirming that, no, I am not crazy, and yes, my parents have completely lost their minds. After my first post, I tried to be the bigger person and set firm adult boundaries. I drove over to my parents' house and had a calm sit-down conversation with them. I explained clearly that my house is my private property purchased with my own money, and it is not a communal family asset up for grabs. I thought we had finally reached a breakthrough when they both nodded quietly. My mom even patted my hand and said, "We hear you, honey. We understand." I should have known it was a trap when she immediately followed up with, "So, what day next week works best for you to start moving your boxes down here?" Last Tuesday, the absolute unthinkable happened. I was in the middle of a highly critical, high-stakes server deployment meeting with our executive team. My screen was sharing live data. Suddenly, my phone started buzzing frantically, and my doorbell camera notification started going crazy. I quickly apologized to my team, muted my microphone, turned off my camera, and checked the live video feed. My parents were standing on my front porch. Behind them were David, Sarah, and I kid you not, a massive 26-foot U-Haul moving truck parked illegally across my driveway. Two burly guys I didn't recognize were already lowering the ramp. I unmuted long enough to tell my VP that I had a severe family emergency and had to drop off the call immediately. I sprinted down the stairs, my heart pounding out of my chest, and yanked the front door open. When I opened the door, my mom cheerfully clapped her hands and announced, "Surprise. We're here to help with the big transition." Sarah is just so excited to get inside and measure the living room windows for her new custom drapes. "What transition?" I yelled, my voice cracking in disbelief. I looked past her and saw my dad already directing David and the two hired movers toward my front door carrying a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. My dad was loudly instructing them, saying, "We'll pack up the master bedroom first. Alex will need some time to disassemble all his little computer toys in the guest room." I immediately stepped out onto the porch and physically blocked the doorway with my body. "Absolutely not. Stop right there. No one is bringing a single box into my house. I need all of you to get off my property right now." Sarah, holding a clipboard and a tape measure, let out a dramatic sigh and had the sheer audacity to say, "Alex, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Stop being so selfish and think of the children. Your times nieces and nephews." I shot back, glaring at her. "They have a home, Sarah. It's just not times my time's home." My mom actually stepped forward and physically tried to push past me. She put her hands on my chest and shoved, trying to wedge herself into my foyer while saying, "Oh, stop being so theatrical, Alex. We already discussed this. You agreed to this." I said no. I yelled, pushing her hands away. I said no multiple times. "Get away from my door." That's when my dad smugly pulled out his smartphone and shoved it in my face. He opened a group text chat that I was obviously not a part of. The chat was titled, "Alex's relocation and house prep." They had been coordinating this forced move for the past week and a half behind my back. I quickly scanned the messages. It was sickening. There was Sarah asking my mom for the model numbers of my expensive LG washer and dryer to ensure her delicate wash settings were available. There was David asking if my garage was deep enough to fit both of their SUVs, or if he'd need to force me to park my car on the street permanently. There was my mom assuring everyone that the concrete basement floor would be perfectly cozy for me once they threw a rug over it. And there was my dad literally calculating how much money they would save on David's rent, suggesting they use the extra cash to take a family vacation to Disney World, a vacation I was clearly not invited to. They had been planning this as if it were a legally binding done deal, as if my house was just a communal piece of property waiting for them to redistribute it. I stood my ground, my hands shaking with rage. I am giving you exactly 10 seconds to get off my property, or I am dialing 911 and having every single one of you arrested for trespassing. My mom instantly started crying, but it wasn't sad crying. It was furious, manipulative, angry crying. "I cannot believe you," she shrieked, her face turning red. "I cannot believe you would threaten your own flesh and blood with the police after everything we have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" I asked coldly. "We raised you. We fed you. We put clothes on your back," she screamed. 20 years ago, when I was a literal child, I yelled back, "That was your legal obligation as a parent." My dad stepped up, getting inches from my face, trying to physically intimidate me. "Watch your damn tone with your mother, boy. A son who disrespects his family doesn't deserve what, Dad?" I interrupted, staring him dead in the eyes. "To own his own home, to have basic adult boundaries, to be treated like a human being instead of a bank account." "Finish that sentence." David finally spoke up from the lawn, looking sheepish. "Look, Alex, man, I didn't ask for this to happen today." But Sarah immediately cut him off, stepping in front of him. "But since your parents are offering the house, it would really help the kids to have proper bedrooms. Leo has been sharing a tiny room with the toddlers. Alex, have a heart." I looked at my brother, disgusted. "Are you seriously okay with this, David? Are you okay with literally stealing your little brother's house?" David just shrugged, looking down at his shoes. "It's not stealing if Mom and Dad think it's what's best for the family as a whole." I was completely done. "Everyone off my property right now. The next person who sets foot on my driveway uninvited gets a police escort to the county jail. I mean it." As they slowly backed away and the movers awkwardly closed up the U-Haul, my mom turned around and shouted at the top of her lungs for the whole neighborhood to hear. "That basement is being finished whether you appreciate it or not, Alex. When you finally come to your senses and stop being a greedy brat, your cot will be ready." The truck left, but the nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up to 53 unread text messages in a brand new group chat called Alex's Transition Support. My mom had recruited the extended family, the Flying Monkeys. Aunt Linda wrote, "So proud of Alex for finally putting family first and helping his brother." Uncle Richard chimed in, "It's about time the boy grew up and learned that family helps family." "Proud of you, son," Cousin Jennifer added. "The basement sounds so nice. You're so lucky you don't have to pay rent anymore." They were spinning a massive web of lies. I sent one single definitive message to the group: "I am not moving. I am not giving up the house I bought." My parents tried to illegally force their way into my home with a moving truck. Anyone who shows up at my property will be trespassed by the police. Then I permanently left the chat. My mom texted me privately seconds later, "Your extreme selfishness is tearing this family apart. I hope your stupid little computer job is worth losing your entire family." I responded, "I'm not losing my family. I'm setting boundaries with abusers who don't respect me, my career, or my legal property rights." She replied, "Property rights? Is that what family means to you now? Cold, sterile legal terms?" "Yes, Mom," I typed back. "When you hire a U-Haul to try and steal my house, legal terms become extremely relevant." I immediately called a locksmith and paid $400 to have every single deadbolt and window lock on my house changed. They had a spare key from 2 years ago when I first moved in, and I wasn't taking any chances. I also upgraded my security system, adding 4 new 4K cameras with motion tracking floodlights. I consulted with a close friend who is a real estate lawyer. He laughed in disbelief, confirming that obviously they have zero legal right to my property. However, he strongly advised me to document every single text, email, and interaction, warning me that people this delusional often escalate when denied what they want. He was right. Update 2, 6 weeks later. I honestly thought the situation couldn't possibly get more surreal or unhinged. I was dead wrong. After my last update, things went completely quiet for about 2 weeks. I foolishly let my guard down, thinking my family had finally realized the legal reality of the situation and given up. In reality, they were just regrouping in the shadows, planning what I can only describe as a highly coordinated, relentless psychological warfare campaign. It started small and passive-aggressive. My mom began posting multiple times a day on Facebook about the current housing crisis and the historical beauty of multi-generational living. She would constantly tag me in articles with titles like "Times Why Selfish Millennials Should Move Back Home, Times and Times," "Hidden Greed of Single Homeowners." She'd leave comments on her own post saying things like, "If only some people understood true family value." Then came the phone calls from extended family. My godmother Susan called me crying. "Alex, your mother is just so heartbroken. She just wants the whole family together. Would it literally kill you to just consider living in the basement? It has a window. My Uncle Joseph called to lecture me. Back in my day, family helped family. We didn't need fancy legal boundaries. We shared what we had. My cousin Mark texted, "Dude, just give them the house. It's just bricks and wood. It's not worth all this drama." I held firm, repeating like a broken record that my house was not a communal asset and was absolutely not up for discussion. That's when phase 2 began. Sarah, my sister-in-law, started a public Instagram account called At Apartment Life with 3 kids. She began documenting their tragic struggles in high definition. She posted highly edited black and white reels of the kids sharing a tiny room set to sad Sarah McLachlan music. She wrote long, agonizing captions about making the best of limited space and teaching my children gratitude even when their own blood relatives refused to give them the bedrooms they deserve. The comment section was an absolute cesspool of my family members and Sarah's church friends offering prayers, hoping that a miracle solution presents itself soon. My mom would reply to every comment with cryptic, manipulative garbage like, "God always provides for those who deserve it," and "family solutions exist for those willing to open their hearts and their doors." Meanwhile, I was slowly losing my mind. The stress was physically making me ill. We were approaching a massive multi-million-dollar product launch at work, and I was pulling 12-hour shifts. My home office was my only sanctuary, a dedicated quiet space where I could focus on complex coding without distractions. The mere thought of moving into my parents' damp basement, fighting my dad for bathroom time, and listening to their constant snide remarks about my fake internet job while I managed critical server infrastructure was genuinely laughable, but my family wasn't laughing. They were actively escalating. 3 weeks ago, I came home from a rare quick trip to the grocery store to find my front lawn had been completely vandalized. My parents had driven over and installed a massive, professionally printed real estate sign in my yard. It read, "Future home of the David family, thanks to Uncle Alex's generosity," complete with high-res photos of my nephews and niece smiling. They had even tied celebratory helium balloons to my mailbox. My neighbors were standing on the sidewalk taking pictures and whispering. I was mortified. I grabbed a kitchen knife, popped the balloons, tore the sign out of the ground, and threw it in the dumpster, but the damage was done. Sarah had already posted photos of the sign on her Instagram with the caption, claiming our new home in faith. Number blessed. Number family first, number God's plan. The comments on her post exploded. Local moms from her PTA were calling me an angel brother. People I had never even met were discussing how beautiful it was that I was giving up my bachelor pad for the children. I couldn't take it anymore. I commented on her post, "I am absolutely not giving up my house. This is targeted harassment. Please stop lying to these people." Sarah deleted my comment within 30 seconds, but not before screenshotting it and sharing it in the family group chat with a dozen crying emojis wailing, "Why is he being so incredibly cruel to the babies?" The very next day, my dad showed up at my house while I was leading a live client presentation. I saw him on my doorbell camera. He was walking around the perimeter of my house with a clipboard, a tape measure, and a notepad, aggressively measuring my windows. I quickly texted him, "Get off my property immediately." He responded, "Just helping David plan for the upcoming window renovations. Ignore me. It's going to be so beautiful." I excused myself from my meeting, ran outside, and found him kneeling in my prized flower beds, digging up dirt and putting it into little plastic baggies. "What the hell are you doing to my landscaping?" I demanded. He didn't even look up. "Sarah wants to start an organic vegetable garden for the kids. I'm taking soil samples to test the pH levels. Don't worry, we'll rip all these useless bushes out next week. Get off my property before I call the police." "Dad, I am not warning you again." He finally stood up, brushing the dirt off his knees, and looked at me with a gaze full of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Your grandfather would be so incredibly ashamed of the man you've become. He built his house with his own 2 bare hands for his family. You buy a house with fake computer money, and you won't even share it with your own brother." "Grandpa respected hard work and ownership," I fired back. "He worked a real job with his hands, and I work a real job with my brain. Leave now." He walked to his truck, but not before shouting, "The basement is finished, Alex. Your mother picked out a nice accessible beige for the walls. It's very calming for your little anxieties. But last week is when we reached an entirely new, terrifying low. I woke up, opened my front door to grab a package, and found a heavy-duty metal lockbox clamped onto my front door handle, the exact kind real estate agents use to store spare keys for open houses. I immediately called my mom, my blood boiling. "Oh, good. You saw it," she chirped happily into the phone. "We thought it would just be so much easier for the big transition. David and Sarah can start moving their little boxes into the garage slowly while you're working, and that way you won't have to be bothered to come open the door for them." "You put a lockbox on my door," I screamed. "Are you insane?" "Oh, Alex, stop being so dramatic. The code is your birthday. We're not strangers. We're family." I hung up, walked to my garage, grabbed my heavy-duty bolt cutters, snapped the lockbox clean off my door, and threw it in the trash. Then I called my security company and had them install perimeter alarms that alert my phone the second anyone steps onto my driveway. 2 days later, an official-looking envelope arrived in my mail. It was from a local law firm. My stomach completely dropped. Were they actually trying to legally sue me for my house? No, it was somehow so much worse and so much more delusional. It was a formal typed-out legal notice that my parents were officially designating a 300-square-foot portion of their basement as a rental dwelling unit, and they were expecting me to sign the attached lease agreement to maintain family harmony and establish the clear adult boundaries you requested. I read the lease terms in absolute horror. Clause 1 rent would be $450 per month, noted as generously below market rate. Clause 2, I would be granted access to the upstairs guest bathroom strictly between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Clause 3 kitchen privileges required a 24-hour written notice, and I was forbidden from cooking aromatic foods that might disturb my dad's evening television viewing. Clause 4, a strict quiet hours policy, enforcing absolute silence after 9 p.m. Clause 5, no overnight guests without 48-hour prior approval from the landlords, my parents. Clause 6, a first right of refusal. Clause stating that if I decided to abandon my stubbornness, they had the right to seize my current home's equity to pay for David's future maintenance costs. They were genuinely seriously trying to formalize me living in their damp basement as a rent-paying restricted tenant, while my brother lived completely rent-free in my gorgeous 4-bedroom house. I scanned the document and forwarded the entire PDF to my real estate lawyer friend. He called me 5 minutes later laughing so hard he was practically wheezing. He literally had to put me on hold to catch his breath. When he finally came back on the line, he said, "Alex, my God, frame this. Print it out on expensive paper, frame it, and hang it on your wall as a daily reminder that sometimes family is absolutely clinically insane. This piece of paper has less legal weight than a napkin drawn on with crayons." Despite the absurdity, the constant barrage of stress was severely affecting my work performance. I was missing minor details in code reviews and spacing out during critical meetings. My manager Chloe pulled me into a private one-on-one video call and gently asked if everything was okay. I completely broke down. I sat in my home office and sobbed, telling her the entire psychotic saga. She listened in stunned silence, her jaw dropping further and further with every detail I shared. "Alex," she said finally, her voice incredibly serious, "I'm going to say something that might be overstepping my bounds as your boss, but you need to hear it. Have you ever considered that your family is deeply, profoundly abusive?" I froze. I'd been so hyper-focused on the logistics of defending my house that I hadn't taken a step back to look at the massive, glaring pattern. The lifelong dismissal of my intelligence and my career. The constant violation of my personal boundaries, the public humiliation campaigns on social media, the extreme emotional manipulation, the complete and total disregard for my autonomy as a human being. "Take some time off," Chloe ordered gently. "Real time. Focus on getting this product launch finished this week, and then take a full week of PTO to figure out your next steps. And Alex, if you need to relocate to get away from this absolute insanity, let me know. Our company will cover the moving costs. Your job is real. Your skills are incredibly valuable, and you are important to us. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, I made the hardest but most necessary decision of my life. I went through my phone and systematically blocked my parents, David and Sarah, on every single platform. Phone numbers, text messages, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and email. I sent one final mass message to the extended family group chat. "My career is real. My house is mine. I will not be moving into a basement. I will not be giving up my property to cater to David's life choices. Anyone who continues to harass, stalk, or bother me about this will be permanently cut out of my life. This is not a negotiation. Goodbye." Then I left the chat and blocked all of them too. The peace was instantaneous. No more buzzing phone. No more doorbell camera alerts. No more passive-aggressive Facebook posts to scroll past. Just total blissful quiet. I threw myself entirely into my work. I finished the product launch flawlessly. My team absolutely crushed our quarterly metrics. Chloe put my name up for a major promotion. I sat in my beautiful home office looking out at my restored hardwood floors, feeling like I could finally take a deep breath for the first time in months. Of course, the peace didn't last. Delusion this deep doesn't just go away quietly, which brings me to the final update. Update 3, final. 4 months later, I, for a long time, whether or not to write this final update, but considering how many of you supported me through the darkest parts of this journey, I figure you all deserve to know exactly how this insane saga ended. After blocking my entire family, I enjoyed roughly 2 months of incredible uninterrupted peace. I earned that promotion at work. Hello, Principal Cloud Engineer. I've got a massive pay bump and finally started seeing a licensed therapist to unpack the decades of toxic dismissive behavior I had normalized. My therapist, Dr. Evans, helped me understand the deep-rooted golden child versus scapegoat dynamic. My parents had always minimized my achievements to keep David comfortable. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When I got a full-ride scholarship to college, I was just lucky. My highly technical six-figure career was just playing with computers. Nothing I ever did was valid unless it fit perfectly into their narrow, blue-collar definition of success, and my sole purpose in their eyes was to act as a safety net for David's life choices. I thought the 2 months of silence meant they had finally accepted legal reality. I was so incredibly naive. 8 weeks into strict no contact, I received a certified letter in the mail requiring my signature. Inside was a massive stack of papers titled Formal Family Intervention Notice. It was a completely fabricated legal document that my parents had typed up and actually paid a notary to stamp, thinking the stamp made it legally binding. The intervention notice included 1, a mandatory psychiatric evaluation referral, claiming my refusal to give up my house was proof of severe antisocial personality disorder. 2, a required family counseling schedule with a therapist who specialized in gaming and internet addiction, because clearly working in the tech industry means I am just severely addicted to video games. 3, a strict proposed timeline for residential transition, dictating exactly what days I was allowed to pack my belongings. 4 glossy 8x10 printed photos of the completed basement apartment, featuring a cheap rug and a door with a plastic plaque that read, Alex's room. But the absolute most terrifying part, the real kicker, they had obtained a blank power of attorney form, pre-filled it with their own names, and attached a letter citing deep concerns about Alex's decision-making capacity and mental decline in light of his recent irrational hoarding behavior. They were laying the groundwork to try and declare me mentally incompetent so they could legally seize control of my assets and sign my house over to David. I didn't laugh this time. I saw red. I immediately contacted a high-powered estate and litigation attorney. I paid him a hefty retainer, and he drafted a cease and desist letter so incredibly aggressive and strongly worded it could strip the paint off a car. It explicitly stated that any further attempts to access my property, claim rights to my home, contact my employer, or question my mental capacity would result in immediate devastating civil lawsuits and criminal harassment charges. The response we got didn't come from my parents. It came from Sarah's brother, who happens to be a low-level divorce attorney. He sent an email claiming my lawyer's letter was unnecessarily hostile and aggressive, and suggested that we all sit down for professional mediation to resolve the communal family housing situation. The communal family housing situation, as if my personal privately owned real estate was a shared community garden waiting to be divided up. My lawyer advised me not to respond. Instead, I doubled down on security. I installed shatterproof film on all my ground floor windows, added a heavy-duty reinforced strike plate to my back door, and set my cameras to record 24/7 to a secure cloud server. Thank God I did. 2 weeks later, at exactly 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, my security system alarm started blaring, alerting me to movement in my fenced-in backyard. I jolted awake, my heart hammering in my throat, and grabbed my phone to check the live camera feeds. There, in crystal-clear infrared night vision, was my brother David holding a massive steel crowbar, actively trying to jimmy open my back patio door. Standing right behind him, acting as a lookout and holding a flashlight, was Sarah. My own flesh and blood brother was attempting to break into my house in the middle of the night. I didn't hesitate. I didn't call down to them. I immediately dialed 911, told the dispatcher there was a burglary in progress with 2 suspects at my back door, and locked myself in my master bathroom. The police arrived in less than 4 minutes. 3 squad cars swarmed my property. Watching the whole thing unfold live on my security cameras was the most surreal out-of-body experience of my life. The cops drew their weapons, shined massive spotlights into the backyard, and ordered David to drop the crowbar. He dropped it instantly, throwing his hands in the air. As the officers aggressively slammed David against the brick siding of my house to handcuff him, I could hear him screaming through the camera's microphone. "Wait! Stop! It's a family matter. It's a misunderstanding. Our parents said it was okay. This is our house. We're just trying to measure the kitchen." Sarah was hysterically sobbing, screaming at the cops that they were traumatizing a mother of 3. I walked downstairs, opened the back door, and calmly confirmed to the police officers that I owned the home. I lived alone, and I absolutely wanted to press full charges. David and Sarah were arrested on the spot for attempted breaking and entering, trespassing, and destruction of private property. My parents bailed them out of county jail the next afternoon. Because I had blocked their numbers, my mom actually went to my next-door neighbor's house crying hysterically and begged to use their phone. She called me screaming so loudly the phone speaker distorted. "You monster! You ruined your brother's life. You traumatized those innocent babies by having their parents locked in a cage like animals." For the record, the kids were not there. They were staying with Sarah's mother across town. Sarah's mother, as I later learned, was the only sane person left in their circle and had vehemently refused to participate in their insane home redistribution plot. The attempted break-in was my absolute breaking point. The house I had loved, the house I had painstakingly restored, was completely tainted. I couldn't sleep. Every time the wind blew, I thought someone was coming with a crowbar. I called Chloe at work. I need that relocation, I told her. Within 48 hours, I hired a premium, discreet moving company. I contacted a ruthless real estate agent. I put my house on the market as a private off-market pocket listing. I accepted my company's generous relocation package to move to Bozeman, Montana, 2,000 miles away, nestled in the mountains, far away from anyone who shared my DNA. I didn't tell a single soul in my family. Because of the insane housing market in Atlanta, my house sold in exactly 4 days for $60,000, over asking price, all in cash, to a lovely young couple who actually appreciated the historic craftsman details I had restored. The closing date was scheduled for a rapid 3 weeks out. During those 3 weeks, while I was secretly packing my entire life into boxes in the dead of night, my family's extinction burst was spectacular and terrifying. My mom showed up at my front door with a literal Catholic priest attempting to perform a blessing on the house to cleanse the greed from the property and prepare it for the family transition. I called the cops and had them trespassed. My dad marched down to the county clerk's office and attempted to file a completely fraudulent contractor's lien against my property title, claiming I owed him $40,000 for childhood rearing expenses and back rent for the womb. The clerk laughed him out of the building. Sarah, out on bail, started a GoFundMe page titled "Help Displaced Children Whose Cruel Uncle Abandoned Them." She raised exactly $140 before the platform nuked the campaign for fraud. David was officially fired from his retail management job because he had missed multiple shifts to stalk my house and sit in his car down the street, watching my driveway. I documented every single insane act. My attorney was building a massive, bulletproof case for permanent multi-state restraining orders. The morning before my official closing date, my parents made one final, desperate, apocalyptic play. I was already in Bozeman, Montana. I had driven cross-country over 3 days. My house in Atlanta was completely empty, echoing and vacuumed clean. My old neighbor called me in a panic. "Alex, your parents are here. They have a massive U-Haul bolt cutters and a guy who looks like a sketchy locksmith. They're trying to drill out your front door lock." They had showed up claiming they had legal tenant squatters' rights because they had established residency. How? By illegally mailing several postcards to themselves at my address over the past month and fishing them out of my mailbox. I conference called the local police precinct and my real estate agent while sitting on the balcony of my new Mountain View apartment watching the live feed on my iPad. This time, the police didn't mess around. When they arrived, my dad tried to fight one of the officers swinging a pair of bolt cutters. My mom tried to chain herself to the front porch railing. Both of my parents were violently arrested for felony destruction of property trespassing and assaulting a police officer. The final closing paperwork went through electronically while my parents were sitting in a sterile holding cell in county lockup. The cash hit my bank account. The house officially belonged to the lovely young couple. By the time my parents posted bail and were released, I was several states away. I changed my phone number entirely. I scrubbed my digital footprint. My only forwarding address is a secure P.O. box managed by a privacy firm. That was roughly 2 months ago. I have heard a few updates through the grapevine via my godmother, who finally snapped out of the delusion and realized how insane my parents were acting. She keeps me updated via email. The stress, the criminal charges, and the sheer humiliation of the situation completely shattered the family. David and Sarah are currently going through a vicious, messy divorce. The legal fees from their attempted break-in drained whatever meager savings they had. My parents are facing significant, ruinous legal fees for their own arrests. They are currently telling anyone who will listen that I maliciously sold the historic family estate out of pure spite to punish the babies. The icing on the cake, that unfinished basement they were so desperate to shove me into, they took out a high-interest loan to finish it, putting themselves $18,000 in debt. It now sits completely empty. Sarah's Instagram account is completely gone after hundreds of people reported her for harassment, fraud, and child exploitation. My new life in Montana is breathtakingly peaceful. My new home office has a massive picture window that looks out over the snow-capped mountains. The air is crisp. My new neighbors bring over freshly baked sourdough bread instead of crowbars. My family simply does not exist here. I am still in intense weekly therapy dealing with the heavy guilt and the profound grief of losing my entire family. I mourn them, but not because they died. I mourn them because this situation finally forced them to take off their masks and reveal exactly who they always were. They never saw me as a son, a brother, or a human being. They saw me strictly as a financial resource, a piece of meat to be carved up and redistributed to make David's life easier. My therapist asked me last week if I have any regrets about how everything went down. I sat in silence for a long time, really thinking about it. I realized I only have one single regret. I regret that I didn't see the truth sooner. The glaring signs were always there. Every childhood achievement dismissed, every boundary constantly pushed, every massive success reframed as sheer luck, or framed as me being selfish for not sharing the spoil. But I absolutely do not regret keeping my house. I do not regret calling the police and watching them get arrested. I do not regret secretly selling the property. I do not regret moving 2,000 miles away into the mountains. I do not regret choosing my own peace, my own sanity, and my own life over their chaotic, toxic entitlement. For anyone reading this who is currently dealing with a family who doesn't respect your career, who mocks your choices, who constantly tramples your boundaries, or who views your success as their personal piggy bank, you are not crazy. Your feelings are valid. Your job is real. Your home is yours. Your life belongs to you and no one else. And sometimes the absolute best, most necessary price you can pay for eternal peace is distance. Massive, unbridgeable distance. I am still a senior cloud infrastructure architect. I still work from home. And now I do it thousands of miles away from toxic abusers who think that working on a computer makes me less deserving of basic human respect. It was the best, most liberating decision I ever made in my entire life. Final edit, since my inbox is blowing up, I want to address a few final things. Yes, I am strictly no contact and will remain so for the rest of my life. No, I do not ever plan to reconcile, even if they apologize, which they won't. Yes, I am incredibly happy, healthy, and thriving in Montana. And to the hilarious commenter who messaged me, asking if my parents' $18,000 empty basement is currently available to rent for $450 a month, I genuinely laughed out loud for a solid 5 minutes. Thank you for that. To all my fellow remote workers out there, your job is real. Your money is real. Don't let anyone, especially your own family, tell you otherwise. Peace out.